Ever wondered which Elvis albums flopped? Did the king really have duds in his discography? Number 1. Having Fun with Elvis on Stage, 1974. Can you imagine an Elvis album with zero music? That's exactly what Having Fun with Elvis on Stage delivered to unsuspecting fans in 1974. Released by Colonel Tom Parker's own label without RCA's involvement, this bizarre album consists entirely of Elvis talking between songs at various concerts, no actual music included. The Colonel created this oddity as a way to release an Elvis product that wouldn't count against contractual obligations with RCA. Fans who purchased the album, expecting classic Elvis tunes instead, got rambling stage banter, awkward jokes, and incoherent mumbling. Critics savaged the release, with Rolling Stone later calling it an album so bad, it defies belief. Music historian Roy Carr described it as totally devoid of all merit. The forgotten songs aren't actually songs at all, just Elvis clearing his throat, laughing awkwardly, and making random observations between unheard performances. Despite its infamous reputation, this album actually charted on Billboard, reaching pound 130. Hardcore fans seeking the complete Elvis collection reluctantly added it to their libraries, while casual listeners who accidentally purchased it likely felt thoroughly confused and deeply disappointed. Colonel Parker, meanwhile, happily pocketed the profits from what amounted to an audio practical joke on Elvis devotees. Today, Having Fun with Elvis on Stage has gained a certain cult status as possibly one of the strangest major artist releases in recording history. It stands as a testament to the exploitation Elvis faced from his own management and the blind devotion of fans willing to purchase anything with his name attached. Number 2. Double Trouble, 1967. Did Elvis actually sing about mulberry trees and puppet shows? When Double Trouble hit shelves in 1967, even loyal Elvis fans struggled to connect with this soundtrack album. Accompanying one of Elvis's most forgettable movies, the album featured songs that seemed completely disconnected from the King's rock and roll roots. The forgotten song, Old MacDonald, represents perhaps the lowest point. Elvis Presley, the hip-swiveling rebel who scandalized America a decade earlier, earnestly singing a children's nursery rhyme. Another forgotten track, Long-Legged Girl, with the short dress on attempts to recapture Elvis's sex appeal, but falls flat with lazy lyrics and a generic arrangement. Critics panned the album for its uninspired material. Elvis himself reportedly hated many of the songs, recording them only to fulfill his movie contract obligations. During this period, Colonel Parker broadcast quantity over quality, pushing Elvis to churn out 3 movies and accompanying soundtracks annually. Double Trouble peaked at pound 47 on the Billboard charts, a shockingly poor showing for an artist of Elvis's stature. The album's failure highlighted the growing disconnect between Elvis's artistic capabilities and the material being forced upon him during his Hollywood years. Interestingly, Double Trouble contained a cover of It Won't Be Long by Doc Pomus and Mort Schumann, songwriters who had previously provided Elvis with genuine hits. However, even their contribution couldn't save this lackluster collection. Number 3. Speedway, 1968. How does a soundtrack featuring Elvis and Nancy Sinatra still manage to disappoint? Speedway demonstrated exactly how in 1968. This album accompanied Elvis's 27th film. A racing-themed movie that signaled the end of his Hollywood career was fast approaching. The forgotten tracks on Speedway include the peculiar "He's Your Uncle, Not Your Dad," a bizarre song about tax problems that mirrored Elvis's own financial troubles at the time. Another overlooked gem of awkwardness is "Goin' Home," which features cringe-worthy lyrics about returning to a rural lifestyle that seemed entirely disconnected from Elvis's actual experiences. Music critics largely ignored the album upon release, treating it as just another contractual obligation rather than a serious artistic statement. Even Nancy Sinatra's presence on the duet, "There Ain't Nothing Like a Song," failed to generate significant interest. The album reached pound 82 on the Billboard chart, one of the lowest positions for an Elvis album during his lifetime. By this point in his career, Elvis had become visibly disengaged from his soundtrack recordings. Sessions for Speedway were reportedly completed with minimal effort, with Elvis often nailing songs in one or two takes, not out of brilliance, but from a desire to finish quickly and leave the studio. RCA included 5 bonus songs unrelated to the film to beef up the album, including "Western Union" and "Mine," both of which quickly faded into obscurity. These additions only highlighted the weakness of the actual soundtrack material. Number 4. Kissin Cousins, 1964. Would you believe Elvis played dual roles as look-alike cousins in a film about feuding mountain families? The accompanying soundtrack to 1964's Kissin Cousins proved just as puzzling as the film's premise. The album's forgotten songs include the uncomfortably titled "Smoky Mountain Boy," featuring Elvis awkwardly affecting a hillbilly persona. Another overlooked track, "One Boy, Two Little Girls," contains lyrics that would raise eyebrows today. The title track itself, while relatively well-known, represents the lightweight, formulaic approach that was draining Elvis's credibility as a rock and roll pioneer. Kissin Cousins was recorded in an astonishing single day, October 10, 1963, highlighting the assembly line approach to Elvis's movie soundtracks during this period. The rushed recording schedule is evident in the finished product's lack of polish and inspiration. Critics at the time noted the growing gap between the innovative rock music of the Beatles and other British invasion bands versus Elvis's increasingly senile and irrelevant movie songs. The album reached only pound 60 on the Billboard chart, suggesting fans were growing tired of the formula as well. Perhaps the most forgotten song, "Barefoot Ballad," features Elvis singing about rural poverty in a way that feels more like caricature than authentic expression. The song, like most of the album, was quickly forgotten even by devoted fans. Number 5. Acclaimed, 1967. Can an album named after a seafood party actually rock? Acclaimed emphatically answered no in 1967. This soundtrack album accompanied Elvis's 25th film, a formulaic beach movie that found the king playing a wealthy heir pretending to be a water skiing instructor. Among the forgotten tracks is "Who Needs Money," a duet with Will Hutchins that attempts social commentary but lands with a thud. Another overlooked song, "Hey, Hey, Hey," lasts less than a minute and consists primarily of Elvis repeating the title phrase, hardly the material of legends. Critics were particularly harsh toward Acclaimed, with many pointing out that Elvis seemed to be going through the motions. By 1967, psychedelia and experimental rock were transforming popular music, making Elvis's cookie-cutter soundtrack songs seem hopelessly out of touch. The album peaked at pound 40 on the Billboard chart, Better than some other soundtrack efforts, but still disappointingly low for an artist of Elvis's stature. The album cover featuring Elvis awkwardly embracing co-star Shelley Fabares has become symbolic of this creatively bankrupt period in his career. Confidence. Another forgotten track ironically lacks the very quality its title suggests. The song's forgettable melody and generic lyrics about self-esteem feel more appropriate for a children's educational program than a release by rock and roll's biggest star. Number 6. Harem Scarum, 1965. Ever heard Elvis sing about a harem while pretending to be in the Middle East? Harem Scarum, also released as Harem Holiday in some markets, stands as perhaps the most culturally tone-deaf entry in Elvis's catalog. Accompanying his 1965 film of the same name, the soundtrack featured Elvis as an action movie star who gets kidnapped while touring the Middle East. The forgotten songs include Shake That Tambourine, a painful attempt at incorporating vaguely Middle Eastern sounds into a rock framework. Another overlooked track, So Close, Yet So Far, from Paradise attempts to create an exotic mood, but instead delivers banal lyrics over uninspired instrumentation. Critics at the time noted the growing creative bankruptcy of Elvis's film projects, with the soundtrack suffering accordingly. The songs for Harem Scarum were recorded in just 3 short sessions in February 1965, reflecting the minimal effort being put into these projects. The album reached #8 on the Billboard chart, though this relatively high placement speaks more to Elvis's star power and loyal fan base than to the album's quality. Sales quickly tapered off as word spread about the subpar material. Golden Coins, another forgotten track, features Elvis awkwardly attempting to incorporate Middle Eastern musical motifs while singing about magic spells and desert sands in what amounts to a cartoonish caricature of Arabic culture. Number 7. Easy Come, Easy Go, 1967. Would you believe Elvis made an album with only 6 songs, totaling less than 13 minutes of music? Easy Come, Easy Go holds the dubious distinction of being Elvis's shortest album, accompanying his 1967 film about a Navy frogman searching for sunken treasure. The forgotten tracks include I'll Take Love, a forgettable ditty that even the most devoted Elvis completists struggle to recall. Another overlooked song, Sing You Children, features a children's chorus that creates an odd contrast with Elvis's increasingly disengaged vocal performance. Critics largely ignored this release, treating it as a minor footnote in a declining career phase. The album reached a dismal #111 on the Billboard chart, making it one of Elvis's worst-performing releases of the era. Perhaps the most telling aspect of Easy Come, Easy Go was RCA's decision to release it as an extended play album rather than a full LP. The label seemingly acknowledged the material wasn't strong enough to justify a complete album. Later, CD reissues would pad the running time with bonus tracks from other sessions. The Love Machine, another forgotten track, features Elvis singing about romantically pursuing a female computer programmer, a concept that might have seemed futuristic in 1967, but comes across as both dated and awkward today. Number 8. Roustabout, 1964. How does an Elvis album, featuring songs about carnivals, end up being so forgettable? Roustabout provides a masterclass in mediocrity, accompanying Elvis's 1964 film where he plays a motorcycle-riding carnival worker. The forgotten songs include Poison, Ivy League, a confusing play on words that attempts to satirize college life but lands with a thud. Another overlooked track, There's a Brand New Day on the Horizon, offers generic optimism without any of the raw emotion that made Elvis's best work compelling. Despite the critical indifference that greeted the album, Roustabout actually reached #1 on the Billboard chart, the last soundtrack album of Elvis's career to achieve this feat. This commercial success masked the growing artistic stagnation evident in the material. Perhaps the most forgotten track, It's a Wonderful World, bears no relation to the Sam Cooke classic of the same name. Instead, it offers platitudes about positivity over a bland arrangement that fails to showcase Elvis's vocal abilities. The album sessions conducted in March 1964 reportedly left Elvis frustrated with the material. According to session musicians, he completed most songs in minimal takes, not as a display of professionalism, but rather to finish the obligation as quickly as possible. Number 9. It Happened at the World's Fair, 1963. Did Elvis really sing about cotton candy and Ferris wheels? The soundtrack to 1963's It Happened at the World's Fair found Elvis performing against the backdrop of the Seattle World's Fair, but the music failed to capture any of the event's innovation or excitement. The forgotten songs include How Would You Like to Be?, a plodding ballad that vanished from public consciousness almost immediately after release. Another overlooked track, They Remind Me Too Much of You, attempts emotional depth but gets lost in overly saccharine arrangements. Critics at the time were beginning to note the pattern of diminishing returns in Elvis's soundtrack work, though this particular album didn't receive enough attention to generate significant negative reviews. The album reached #4 on the Billboard chart, riding on Elvis's still considerable star power, rather than the material's quality. A World of Our Own, another forgotten track, features lyrics about romantic isolation that ironically mirror Elvis's growing creative isolation during this period. The song, like most on the album, was recorded in a perfunctory manner at RCA's Studio B in Nashville. Perhaps the album's only saving grace is One Broken Heart for Say, which at least attempts to recapture some of Elvis's earlier rock energy, though it still falls short of his groundbreaking 1950s work. Number 10. Elvis, Fool, 1973. Can an album be so forgotten that even its official title causes confusion? Elvis, Fool, from 1973 is so obscure that it's often referred to by different names. This compilation album cobbled together leftovers from various recording sessions centered around the single Fool. The forgotten songs include It's Still Here, a country-tinged ballad recorded back in 1971 that was deemed not good enough for release until RCA needed to fill out this compilation. Another overlooked track, Padre, features Elvis singing from the perspective of someone confessing to a priest, an unusual lyrical choice that didn't connect with listeners. Critics largely ignored this release, treating it as a cash grab rather than a legitimate Elvis album. The compilation didn't chart in the US, though it reached #15 in the UK, where Elvis maintained a strong following despite his creative decline. I'll Take You Home Again, Kathleen, another forgotten track, finds Elvis covering an old Irish standard with little of the interpretive genius he brought to his best ballad performances. The arrangement feels perfunctory, and Elvis's vocal lacks the commitment of his more inspired work. RCA released this album during a period when they were flooding the market with Elvis product, often without his direct involvement in the compilation process. The album's cover, featuring Elvis in his white jumpsuit concert attire, had little connection to the material inside, much of which predated his Las Vegas comeback period. Number 11. Frankie and Johnny, 1966. Would you believe Elvis made an album set in the 1890s riverboat era? Frankie and Johnny accompanied one of Elvis's most historically confused film projects, featuring the King as a riverboat gambler in a period costume drama. The forgotten songs include Beginner's Luck, a generic up-tempo number that bears no relation to the film's supposed historical setting. Another overlooked track, What Every Woman Lives For, contains outdated gender perspectives that were problematic even for the 1960s. Critics dismissed both the film and soundtrack, with many noting that Elvis seemed increasingly miscast in these elaborate period pieces. The album reached a modest #20 on the Billboard chart, showing a continuing decline in commercial appeal for his soundtrack releases. Shout It Out, another forgotten track, awkwardly attempts to incorporate 1960s dance music trends into the supposedly 1890s setting of the film. This anachronistic approach typified the confusion of Elvis's film projects during this period. The album was recorded in a mere 3 days in May 1965, nearly a year before the film's release. This rushed schedule was typical of Elvis's soundtrack recordings during this period, with quality sacrificed for efficiency. Number 12. Paradise, Hawaiian Style, 1966. Ever heard Elvis sing a love song to a dog? Paradise, Hawaiian Style, features exactly that bizarre moment with the track Queenie Wahine's Papaya, one of many forgotten songs from this 1966 soundtrack album. The album accompanied Elvis's third Hawaiian-themed film, a sign that Colonel Parker and the Hollywood studios had completely run out of fresh ideas for their star. Another forgotten track. Datton features cringe-worthy lyrics about romantic pursuits that seemed outdated even in 1966. Critics noted the recycled themes and uninspired material, with some pointing out that Elvis had already made 2 superior Hawaiian films. The album reached #15 on the Billboard chart, a mediocre showing that indicated waning interest in Elvis's formulaic soundtrack albums. House of Sand, another forgotten track, attempts philosophical depth with its metaphors about building relationships on solid foundations. However, the lightweight arrangement and Elvis's perfunctory delivery undermine any potential significance. The album was recorded in July 1965, almost a full year before the film's release. Evidence of the assembly line approach to Elvis's career during this period. Session musicians from these recordings later recalled Elvis's visible frustration with the material, though he remained professional throughout the process. Number 13. Raised on Rock, 1973. Can an album with rock in the title contain so little actual rock music? Raised on Rock from 1973 attempted to position Elvis as still relevant in the age of glam and progressive rock, but the results fell disappointingly short. The forgotten songs include 3 Corn Patches, a bizarre track with unclear lyrics, and a lackluster arrangement. Another overlooked number, Just a Little Bit, attempts to capture the funk sounds becoming popular in the early 1970s, but feels like a pale imitation of current trends. Critics noted Elvis's increasingly strained vocal performances and the album's disjointed feel, the result of combining sessions from Memphis and Hollywood. The album reached #41 on the Billboard chart, a poor showing for an artist of Elvis's stature. Girl of Mine, another forgotten track, features dated production and lyrics that feel disconnected from the authentic emotions that characterized Elvis's best ballad performances. The song typifies the album's overall feeling of an artist going through the motions. The recording sessions for Raised on Rock were reportedly difficult, with Elvis's deteriorating health and personal problems affecting his concentration and stamina. Several sessions had to be cut short or rescheduled, contributing to the album's patchwork quality. Number 14. Love Letters from Elvis, 1971. Did Elvis really release an album of leftovers while barely participating in its creation? Love Letters from Elvis consists entirely of songs recorded during the sessions for 1970's That's the Way It Is, but deemed not good enough for that release. The forgotten songs include Got My Mojo Working, Keep Your Hands Off of It, a blues medley that lacks the energy and conviction of Elvis's better explorations of the genre. Another overlooked track, Heart of Rome, features Elvis singing about Italian romance in a way that feels inauthentic and forced. Critics dismissed the album as scraps from the table, with many noting that Elvis himself had little involvement in compiling these leftover tracks for release. The album reached pound 12 on the Billboard chart, respectable but far below the performance of Elvis's more engaged projects. When I'm Over You, another forgotten track, attempts to showcase Elvis's emotional range, but falls flat due to an uninspired arrangement and a vocal that suggests Elvis was simply clearing his throat between more important recordings. RCA released this album during a period when they were attempting to maximize profits from Elvis's catalog, often prioritizing quantity over quality. Elvis was reportedly displeased with this approach, but felt powerless to prevent these compilations of rejected material from reaching the public. Number 15. Elvis Sings Flaming Star, 1968. Have you ever seen an Elvis album with completely misleading cover art? Elvis Sings Flaming Star takes the crown with its 1968 release featuring a cover photo from the 1960 film Flaming Star, despite containing no songs from that film, except the title track. This bizarre budget compilation album assembled random movie songs that hadn't appeared on previous albums. The forgotten tracks include A Cane and a High-Starched Collar, a song from the film Frankie and Johnny that even devoted Elvis fans struggle to remember. Another overlooked inclusion, Riches, comes from the film Paradise, Hawaiian style, and features Elvis awkwardly attempting cowboy-themed humor. Critics ignored this release entirely, recognizing it as a transparent attempt to squeeze additional profits from existing recordings. The album didn't chart on Billboard, unusual for an Elvis release during his lifetime. Summer Kisses, Winter Tears, another forgotten track, originally appeared in the film Flaming Star, but was cut from the final version, making its inclusion here particularly misleading. The song's eerie, dreamlike quality stands in contrast to most of Elvis's soundtrack work, but wasn't enough to elevate this haphazard compilation. The album's budget price point and minimal promotion indicated that even RCA didn't have confidence in this release. The recording eventually went out of print and remains one of the most difficult Elvis albums to find in its original form, a testament to its status as perhaps the least essential entry in his vast catalog. Are these albums really as bad as critics claimed, or are they misunderstood gems waiting for rediscovery?